Nintendo Switch Online is the Game Pass we have at home. It doesn't have Starfield or Guilty Gear Strive, but it does have Street Fighter 2 and Virtua Fighter 2, or at least versions of them. We'll get into that. After these caught my eye, I investigated and discovered more strange 90s fighting games on the service than I had expected. Let's discuss them all. I'm saving my favourite till last, so if you get bored, click to that chapter of the video. Unfortunately, there are some fighting games exclusive to NSO in Japan which I have not included in my list. There are some borderline games I could have included but didn't, like Punch-Out and some wrestling games. There are also tons of beat-em-ups. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a part 2 to this video where I broaden my net. In the meantime, let's start with Street Fighter 2, specifically Street Fighter 2 Special Champion Edition for the Sega Mega Drive/Genesis. Street Fighter 2 is notorious for establishing the foundations of the modern fighting game genre and having a crapload of different versions. This Sega port packs in two of those versions, Champion Edition and Hyper Fighting. I mostly played the latter, which includes a few upgrades including extra special moves for most characters. It's not the definitive classic version of Street Fighter 2, which is arguably Super Turbo, but it still offers fast-paced and pretty refined fighting between plenty of iconic characters. The relatively small number of moves each character has makes the game feel accessible, once you've found a move list online at least. While I still struggle with Dragon Punch inputs, plenty of characters have movesets with controls I found easier to use more consistently, such as E Honda. The stages are lovely and add a lot of personality to the characters they're attached to. I really like the mix of characters in this game, including the weirder ones like Blanca. It feels like Capcom were boldly embracing fun over realism and offering the player a smorgasbord of styles, both visual and play. This eclectic set of characters, as well as fairly flexible options over game speed and difficulty, give the arcade mode good replayability and an opportunity to have fun while getting better at the game. This mode is punctuated by occasional special mini-game levels where you beat up something other than another fighter, such as a car, which boosts your point tally. This is a reminder of the arcade era that spawned, well, all the games in this video. The limited movesets of many of these games mean the arcade modes put me in mind of boss fights in 2D platformers. You're stuck in an enclosed space and must, using your limited available tools, defeat this opponent who comes with its own gimmicks and attacks before it defeats you. The magic that takes these games beyond their arcade peers is how naturally they translate to two-player competition. That said, I'm looking at these games on Nintendo Switch Online through the single-player experience, which is how I played them. I half expected the Mega Drive/Genesis port of SF2 to have some Sega jank that dragged it down, but it really doesn't. The graphics are bright and colourful, the game feels, looks and sounds great, except for the voice lines, which sound overcompressed or something. There are lots of ways to play Street Fighter 2 on the Switch, and this is a decent option, albeit probably not the best. If you have a subscription to Nintendo Switch Online plus the expansion pack though, and don't want to pay for the Street Fighter Anniversary Collection or any other edition, this is a great way to experience a foundational piece of fighting game history which remains a good time to this day. The explosive success of Street Fighter 2 spawned a rush of developers trying to clamber onto that cash wagon. Some learned from Street Fighter 2 and incorporated its lessons into their own thing, but a few were a bit more shameless in their imitation. Capcom felt that the developers of Fighter's history, Data East, had crossed the line and took them to court over it. The judge ruled that no copyright had been violated. Perhaps ironically, Data East had previously sued the publisher of World Karate Championship over its similarity to their own game, Karate Champ. Maybe losing that lawsuit gave Data East the confidence that they too could play at that game and would get away with making such a plainly similar game to SF2. Looking at the game on its own merits, I actually had fun with it. It controls pretty well to me and it looks great. I really like the backgrounds. Look, this one has a guy walking his dog. If I was in the 90s and didn't know which had come first or which would go on to have a massive legacy, I think I would struggle to choose between this and the game that inspired it, based on the versions on offer in Nintendo Switch Online at least. Tuff E Nuff is basically another SF2 clone, albeit one with some really unique box art. The gameplay follows the formula and gets it more or less right. If you're on a train journey with your Switch, you could definitely pass the time with a bit of fun in the arcade mode. I feel like the artists had fun working on this game. The stages are dark, but there are some cool ones. My favourite thing about the game is the characters. I mean, look at Dolph, look at Beans. I love this weird campy design. Can we get Beans as a DLC guest character in Street Fighter 6, please? One unique thing about Tuff E Nuff is the replay system. After a fight, you can re-watch the last few seconds and even step through it frame by frame if you want to. This does expose the somewhat limited animations of a lot of the moves, but could also be seen as a way for a committed player to infer stuff like hitboxes and even frame data, though I'm sure that wasn't the intention in 1993. The earliest Street Fighter 2 clone on NSO is 1992's Doomsday Warrior. I do wish they had spent a bit longer trying to get the gameplay to feel good. The movement is quite floaty and the controls took a while to get used to. It uses a punch button, a kick button, a jump button, and the shoulder buttons for block. Why did they use the shoulder buttons when there's a face button going totally unused? Once I got used to it, I did have some fun and discovered a somewhat experimental approach to the game's systems. Health is in blocks, and a block of health will gradually refill while a player isn't taking any damage, encouraging you to get in there and finish off your opponent before they recover. Then, after winning a match in the story mode, you can upgrade 5 different stats, I think equating to punch, kick and special move damage, how much damage you take, and how quickly your health recovers. The more health you have left, the more points you have to assign. This rewards players grinding to give themselves maximum upgrades. You can choose the order that you take on your opponents, so if there's one you struggle with, you could try to get in some wins against easier opponents and level up your attacks before taking them on. There's some funky characters including New Form who can reshape themselves into spikes and whatever this is. Overall, Doomsday Warrior's interesting ideas are let down by their execution. If this game felt better to play, it might have had a bigger impact. I haven't played a Virtua Fighter game before, but even as a relative newcomer to fighting games, I am aware of the reputation of this series as a pioneer in 3D gaming. I was excited when I saw Virtua Fighter 2 on the Genesis list for Nintendo Switch Online with those beautiful bulky polygons on the box art thumbnail. So, to be honest, I was disappointed when I booted it up to find that this version is 2D and sprite based. The disappointment continued into my first impression of the game. Movement felt ridiculously sluggish and mashing buttons didn't seem to produce any interesting moves. Was this port a shallow cash-in sullying the good name of Virtua Fighter? I hit up GameFAQs and discovered move lists longer than those of any other game in this video. This port has dropped a dimension, and I haven't played the arcade or Saturn versions of VF2 to compare, but while it may be somewhat simplified, it is far from simple. Virtua Fighter uses 3 buttons: kick, punch and block. Each character has a wide range of moves available through combinations of these buttons and directional inputs, such as forward punch. There are attack strings, so sometimes quickly pressing punch doesn't just do the same punch twice, it causes a unique string of 2 different punches. There are lots of moves that launch the opponent into the air, giving you an opportunity to get in some juggle hits before they land. Many characters have a variety of throws, as well as recovery moves to get up with after being thrown. That sluggish movement is also more complex than it seemed at first. Like many modern fighting games, but unlike most of the other 90s games on NSO, you can double tap directions to dash forward and back in this game. It's even possible to cancel movements and to rapidly backdash. Between this and the 2 types of jumps, with different movesets possible in combination with different types of jump, there is a lot more to movement than the slow crawl suggested by the non-dash walking. Given that this game has a ring out mechanic, the role of movement can be even more significant. This also adds complexity to combat. You might be behind on health, but landing a move that knocks your opponent off the edge could win you the round anyway. On the other hand, if you're not careful, you could throw away an advantage by jumping off the side of the platform by accident. This game is a lot more grounded in realism than Street Fighter 2 and its imitators. There are some beautiful and colourful backgrounds, and the characters do have some appeal. I enjoyed the win poses, but you don't get the wackiness or straight up sci-fi aesthetic of some of the other fighting games on NSO. This extends to gameplay. You won't be getting spammed with fireballs or dodging stretchy Dalsimian limbs here. it's not as easy to pick up and have fun with as those games. You can't just remember 3 or 4 special move inputs and mash your way bombastically through the arcade mode. If Street Fighter 2 is a tube of Pringles and Fighter's history is some snack right stackers from Aldi, then Virtua Fighter 2 is a salad that you have to make yourself. If you persevere with it, you'll probably be glad that you did, but then again, if you're going to commit serious time and effort to learning a fighting game, you're probably better off considering options beyond Nintendo Switch Online's offerings. To be blunt, Mech Fight is absolutely sick. It was originally released by Nintendo on the Famicom in 1993 and for 30 years has only been officially available to players in Japan. In September 2023, it was quietly released to Western audiences for the first time through Nintendo Switch Online. The only problem is, it's still in Japanese, which serves as a bit of a barrier to entry. A fan translation does exist, which I spent some time playing. I'll show a mix of footage from the Nintendo Switch Online version in Japanese and the translated version which I played on an emulator on my phone. Mech Fight came out on the Famicom well over 2 years after its much more powerful successor, the Super Famicom, was released. This, combined with the lack of an arcade version and Japan-only release, may have limited the impact this game ended up making on the gaming landscape. But did this hardware constraint limit the game itself? In my opinion, not at all. Or at least not in a bad way. After all, finding ways around constraints can be a catalyst for creativity. The robot fighters of Mech Fight are made up of floating heads and limbs. Who needs arms and legs when you can kick and punch without them? This may have been inspired by memory restrictions, but it doesn't feel like a workaround. It feels like a creative triumph. The cast is full of character, drummed up through subtle design differences and movement. The roster feels diverse, and it is. There are literally dozens of fighters in this game, more than any other fighting game on home consoles at the time. The first part of the story is structured a bit like Mega Man. You choose which opponent to face, and once you've beaten them, they are recruited to your side, and you can use that character in subsequent fights. This adds an element of strategy. Which opponent do you want to take on first, so you can use them against a trickier enemy afterwards? But after beating the 8 enemies, which wasn't too hard, I found the game wasn't over. There were more, and more again after that. These waves of opponents get progressively more difficult, which is good. Just when I started getting comfortable, the challenge got slightly beyond my comfort level, forcing me to up my game. One of the absolute best things about this game, for the time, 1993 remember, on an 8-bit console, is that the characters have little tutorials demonstrating the inputs for their special moves with an on-screen controller and a basic training mode. Sure, nowadays that would be considered hardly the bare minimum, but after playing the other games in this video, it was such a breath of fresh air. I could check out a character's moves in-game. I didn't need to find a game facts page from 15 years ago. Thanks to the on-screen controller in the demo, you can even benefit from these without understanding any of the Japanese once you know where to find them. After getting familiar with the layout of the game through the English ROM, I was able to play pretty comfortably back on the Switch, although I did miss out on the wacky mad scientist plot. Each character has 4 special moves which are easy to pick up. The game plays smoothly, it feels quick and sometimes frantic, but gives you enough time to respond to your opponent's moves and develop a game plan. Mech Fight has the most unique aesthetic of any fighting game on Nintendo Switch Online. Was it inspired by Street Fighter 2? Certainly. It has taken lessons from that game and used them to help develop its moves and gameplay. From the paradise that Capcom created for us, no one will be able to expel us, and Mech Fight doesn't try to. And yet it feels far more creative and smoother to play than the vast majority of games that try to cash in on the 90s fighting game craze, and it's on a freaking 8-bit console. There is a small community still playing this game and various community-made versions of it to this day, albeit not on the Switch. Nonetheless, I urge you to give Mech Fight a try. It is an incredible early example of the fighting game community thriving within constraints, and it deserves greater recognition. Maybe this long overdue worldwide release through Nintendo Switch Online will finally give it that opportunity.